Alfred Marshall, a great economist of the 19th century. Who was Alfred Marshall? Alfred Marshall was one of the most influential economists of his time. His ideas helped shape modern economics, especially the field of microeconomics. Today, almost everything we learn in microeconomics has been given by Alfred Marshall. Let's explore his theories in a simple and interesting way. Who was Alfred Marshall? He lived from 1842 to 1924. He was a British economist. His most famous book, Principles of Economics, was published in 1890. His work laid the foundation of supply and demand analysis, marginal utility, price theory, and more. Let's understand his main theories. One of his main theories was law of supply and law of demand, or price determination. Imagine a market as a seesaw. On one side, there is a seller, which is supply, and on the other side, the buyer, that is demand. Marshall said that the price of anything, let's say apples, is determined by the push and pull between how many apples people want and how many are available. The idea is called equilibrium price, where the quantity demanded and the quantity supplied balance each other. Basically, law of demand states that higher the price of a product, the lower will be the quantity demanded. And law of supply states that higher the price of a product, the more supply of that product sellers are willing to provide. For example, if apples are too expensive, fewer people will buy them, so price drops. If they are too cheap, they sell out, so price rises. Eventually, the price settles where both sides are happy. This is called as the equilibrium price, and this is how the price of every product and service is determined by the free market forces of demand and supply. His next important idea is law of diminishing marginal utility. Marshall borrowed this idea from earlier economists and popularized it. Utility is similar to satisfaction, the value that you derive from a product, and marginal utility means the extra satisfaction you get from one more unit of something. For example, you are eating a cake. The first piece of cake is really tasty for you. The second will be still nice. The third will not be so satisfying. And by the fourth or fifth piece, you will feel like not eating anymore. So, the more of something you consume, the less extra satisfaction you get from each new unit. That's diminishing marginal utility. Marshall used this to explain why demand curves slope downwards. The next idea was consumer surplus and producer surplus. What is consumer surplus? Marshall asked, what if you are willing to pay 100 rupees for a product but you get it for just 60 rupees? That 40 rupees difference is your consumer surplus, the extra happiness or value that you gained. It's like going to a concert and realizing that you got front row seats at half the price. Opposite is producer surplus. Just like consumers have surplus, so do producers. If a company is willing to sell a pen for 10 rupees but they sell it for 25 rupees, that extra 15 rupees is producer surplus, the extra profit they made above their minimum cost. Marshall helped formalize these two ideas into the analysis of market efficiency. You can see consumer surplus versus producer surplus. His next important idea is the theory of production and cost. Marshall explained how costs behave as production increases. He also gave the idea of short-run costs versus long-run cost and explained the difference between fixed cost and variable cost. He showed or introduced the famous concept of the U-shaped cost curve, showing how costs fall initially with efficiency, then rise again due to complexity and inefficiency. His next great idea was economies of scale. Marshall noticed that big firms often produce things cheaper. Why? Because of economies of scale, efficiency is gained as production increases. He split them into internal economies of scale which were within the firm, for example, using better machines, and external economies which were outside the firm, for example, better infrastructure in an industrial town. This explained why industrial clusters became so successful. His next great idea was time periods in price theory, short run versus long run. Marshall emphasized that time matters in economics. In the short run, supply is limited, only demand affects price. But in the long run, supply adjusts as well, so both supply and demand determine price. He famously used the metaphor of the short run is like a snapshot, but the long run is like a movie. Partial equilibrium analysis was also introduced by Marshall. Instead of studying the entire economy at once, like general equilibrium, Marshall zoomed in on one market at a time, like a scientist using a microscope. This helped make economic analysis simpler and more precise. To conclude, why was Marshall so important? Alfred Marshall made economics more scientific, more mathematical, and more relevant to real life decision making. And yet, he always insisted that economics is not just about numbers, it's about people. In summary, Alfred Marshall gave theories like supply and demand, marginal utility, consumer surplus and producer surplus, cost curves, the differences between fixed and variable costs, economies and diseconomies of scale, time in economics, and partial equilibrium. He revolutionized the field of microeconomics. Thank you so much for listening.